And joining us now is the host and moderator of NBC News Meet the Press, Todd. Chuck, welcome to Cleveland.
Great to be here, Russ.
Ohio, obviously a crazy political state these days. You've watched it for a long time. What word would you use to describe the Buckeye State politically?
I'm going to go with unclear for now. And I say that, I know that sounds like kind of a milquetoast word, but it's like, look, there's some larger trends here in parts of Ohio that are shifting everything to the right. This is a state that I think is definitely trending Republican. At the same time, you have these three fairly large urban centers in Cincinnati, Columbus, and Cleveland that are Columbus, extraordinary growth, Cleveland always on the verge of revitalization, and Cincinnati the same thing, that do, that sort of mirror our national politics where the cities and the suburbs are blue or light blue and everything else is light red or dark red. And I think that what's unclear to me is where are Cincinnati and Cleveland headed? And I said sort of as population centers. Are they going to grow again and grow faster than the average? Are they going to sort of catch fire the way Columbus caught fire in the last 20 years? If they do, I think then that changes the state's politics again. If they sort of continue to be, stagnant growth and all of that, this is a state that I think is going to look a lot more like Indiana politically over the next decade.
As you look at the Tim Ryan, J.D. Vance race for Senate, we're 5 or 6 weeks away. What do you think is the key issues we have to look out for, the key things we should watch over the next month or so?
Well, look, I think the biggest thing is sort of how J.D. Vance sort of just simply tries to turn out Republicans. And, he's got the advantage in there are just more Republicans than Democrats. And Tim Ryan has to do something that many Democrats don't successfully do, win over a whole bunch of right-leaning voters in order to get to 50%, right? He is sort of, I think there's a ceiling for your typical Democratic candidate of somewhere around 45, 46, and how can, that overperformance. And what I'll be curious to see is the tone of Vance's campaign in this last month. Because it used to be, when you and I were first coming into politics, October was the month that politicians, when they were on the air, were trying to convince you that they owned the middle and that they were middle of the road. Now it's all about a turnout election, a base turnout, except Tim Ryan is not running that campaign because he can't. There's not enough on his side. So I'm fascinated to see, does Vance just go with a base turnout strategy and just sort of continue with sort of a slightly softer version of his primary campaign? Or does he try to go to the middle? Does he try to fix his abortion stance, which I think doesn't play well with this middle of the road voter? That to me is what I'm looking for at the end. And then just tactically, do national Democrats ever actually play here? Tim Ryan's been on his own. The polls are close, but the Democrats nationally don't really believe they can win in Ohio. In 2 weeks, if they throw a big check in here and suddenly you see a national number, you're like, oh, they must see something.
Yeah.
So that will be the tell, if you will, of whether Ryan can break through that 47-48 barrier.
Along those lines, Tim Ryan has a commercial where he says, and I don't think I've ever seen this from a candidate of either party, where he actually credits the former president of the other party. He says, I voted with Trump on trade or whatever it is.
I saw that ad.
Surprising at all to you, or is that kind of the game plan here?
Look, no, and you know what, in some ways, Tim Ryan is running the throwback campaign that I was just describing what October used to be about, which is, in a place like Ohio, it used to be standard practice that in October, you actually ran an ad. If you were a Democrat, you ran an ad that talked about working with Republican X, or if you were a Republican, you talked about the ad that maybe around here it would Mike DeWine. I worked with Ted Kennedy, whatever it was back, and this is in the 90s, because there was this middle of the road voter. If Ryan pulls this off, I do think it could actually sober up a lot of politicians to remember, hey, you know what, the middle, if you actually run to the middle, you can win. Right now, there's not a lot of strategists in Washington that believe that works anymore, that it's only a handful of politicians put it off. But if Ryan pulls this upset, I do think it will have that kind of impact, because he is running what I would call a 90s campaign, which is do what you can to sort of agree a little bit with the other side. Bill Clinton, it's very Clinton-esque of Ryan to do this, and I don't mean that as some sort of negative tactic. That's how Bill Clinton was able to win the presidency twice in a country that probably leaned a little right at the time.
Let's talk about nationally now. Do you think, what's the word from D.C., will Republicans take back the Senate?
The conventional wisdom is that Democrats probably are slightly favored to hold the Senate, and Republicans are slightly favored to win the House. And you look at it, there are two cross currents going on, right? I think the Dobbs decision did change everything. There's no doubt about it. If this is a pocketbook election, Republicans are going to run away with it. But I don't think this is a pocketbook election for everybody. And so Dobbs certainly has changed, I think. You know, the Democrats' chances of holding the House are not 50%, but they're not 1%. You know, there is a scenario. I think they come up short because too many Democrats retired. You know, they're missing a few that if they were running in these old seats of theirs, if, you know, yeah, they'd probably be in a better position to take advantage of the fact that the environment's kind of evened up. I look at these midterms as sort of a continuation of 2020. And in fact, I think we're going to have a high turnout. I think both bases are energized to a point. And the only question I have is whether the young voters on the left are going to show up and whether the hardcore Trump voters without Trump's name on the ballot on the right are going to show up. That's about the only thing that we don't know. But I do think this is going to be an extraordinarily close election. And I think it's possible, something we've never had before, that on election night, we won't be able to tell you who's going to control the House of Representatives. And if that's the case, then it's more proof that we're basically rerunning 2020 more than we're having a separate and distinct midterm.
You brought this up a couple of times. You mentioned the Dobbs decision. Roe versus Wade, how big of an issue, this split over Roe versus Wade, how big of an impact will this have for Republicans looking forward, not only this year, but in 2024 as well?
Look, I think it's done an entire scramble. Think of it this way, Russ. For basically our professional lifetimes, with Roe v. Wade as law of the land, the average elected official could essentially base their abortion position on that fact. I'm pro-life. You know, I'm hoping that Roe v. Wade, that would be the standard answer on the right. Or someone on the left, like, look, we need to have some more protections in there. But both sides could get away with not telling you what their line was. Well, where are you uncomfortable when abortion is legal? You didn't have to get into the details. What this has done is forced everybody that's running for office, whether you are running for state rep or the presidency of the United States, you got to tell us everything. No. Well, where are you on this? What about this? What if this happens? What about, you know, all the different parts that come with this? And I think for Republicans, the pro-life movement is basically been the gasoline for their turnout engine. And without it, what happens? If they have this complete sort of where they're the party that's divided on abortion, right? Democrats, for a long time, were more divided on abortion, right? Usually on late term. Now it's the Republicans. I think the overturn of Roe v. Wade is going to haunt the party for a decade.
You run the longest running show in network television.
Custodian, as I call myself.
Well,
I'm just a custodian of it because I don't want to be the last one.
I hear you.
I want to hand that baton.
Certainly. In this era where politically everybody hates each other, you know, nobody nobody agrees with anybody on anything. Everybody's got their mind made up. How tough is it being you, being the host of this program that examines both sides and brings this to the American people?
Well, look, I always say, look, I'm stuck having to cover politics as it is, not as I wish it were. And that's how I just go about it every day. It's like, at the end of the day, our job is to what? Tell people what's happening. And I always say, I probably spend more time than other news anchors dealing with the why. Why is this happening? That's sort of what a Sunday morning program's about. And in some ways, the noisier it's gotten with the partisans, there's almost sort of a clarity of purpose that's come with it, which you just sort of realize, okay, these folks always existed. We hear from them now, but just like whether you're a professional athlete, you know, you have a job to do. Tune out the noise. Don't have rabbit ears. And I think the biggest mistake people in our business do sometimes is if they, and I apologize for rabbit ears, talk about an older reference there. You know, back in the old days, you used to need an antenna to find out. You know,
put a graphic
yeah,
up and
exactly.
explain what that means.
You know, the more you know, right? That's one to grow on. But it's like, don't tune into that noise, right? At the end of the day, stay focused. And, you know, again, I think politics is tumultuous right now. I think it's important that we explain what's happening and why it's happening. And, you know, do I wish our information ecosystem were a little cleaner? You know, I worry that we've basically taken the pipes that give us drinking water and the pipes that deal with our sewer system, and it's the same pipe when it comes to information. That's not a good place to be. And I feel for the viewer. There's a lot of sewer system stuff that's out there when it comes news business. And I think people don't realize some of the ethics that we have to abide by. And I think, you know, the best thing we can do is, again, focus on our mission and be transparent about it.
Yeah, I've got a couple more, then we'll get you out of here. Of course, politicians have always been adept at dancing. There's that scene from that little whorehouse in Texas. I dance a little sidestep. That's a play, by the way.
Yeah.
Out there. But never more than today. You know, I watch you. I watch some of the other shows, and these folks are just amazing at how they dance out of things. And I know you push them, you try to get the answer. As you're sitting there talking to them, what's going through your head when you know that they are doing this incredibly delicate and sometimes not so delicate dance to get out of it?
So I would say probably once a show, I want to have the moment that says, I can't take it anymore. You know, you're just babbling. That's what I want to say at times. At the end of the day, though, I don't want to be a part of the story. So ultimately, I still view the job as I'm here, I'm the middleman, whether I like it or not. You know, I didn't get into this to build a brand or run for office. I do worry that some people got into our business because they want to do something else with it for themselves. But I didn't get into it that. So you hope you're just sitting there trying to explain what it is and hope that people sort of take you at your word. But I do want to just scream at times that the person didn't give you an answer. But then if I did that, it ends up reflecting more in our crazy environment. So that I'm hopeful that I think the viewer's smart enough to get it when a politician babbles or when a politician avoids an answer. You know, I had somebody email me the other day, boy, you asked all the questions I wanted to hear. I'm sorry, so-and-so didn't answer your question. I'm comfortable with that. I don't want somebody saying, why didn't you make them answer your question? We can't make these people do anything.
Right.
The best we can do is hopefully their non-answer actually informs you about something more deeply.
As you were saying, you hope the viewer understands it. You put it out there. And you, in this
As I always say,
understands.
I'm assuming the viewer accepts the premise. And if you don't, you know, find out why you don't.
Again, welcome to Cleveland Show.
Russ, great to be here, brother.
Talk to you next time.
You got it.